So French cuisine, it has mother sauces. And Sichuan cuisine, it has chili oil. They're in the dipping sauces. They're used as the base of most of the Liangbang cold salads. They're used as a finishing oil, as an instant stir-fry base, and they can really be seen everywhere from noodles to soups to noodles and soup. But something that you might not know is that there's not just one Sichuan chili oil. There's more than one. So today, what we wanted to try to do was teach you all of them. But I guess before we do that, we should be upfront that a lot like Escaffier's mother sauces, a lot of these chili oils are definitely a little bit more of a restaurant thing. Just how, of these 6, you would probably only whip up a bechamel. A Sichuan home cook would likely only make 1 or maybe 2 of these, and equally, they could also just go and buy some from their local market. So some of these, they can get a little intense, and maybe in the end, they might not work out for you in your kitchen. But the reason to at least try is that if you use one of these very good homemade chili oils, especially if you combine it with a very good homemade Chinese-style stock, you are going to make the very best Sichuan food you've ever cooked in your life. Like, together with this, we penned a whole bunch of written recipes for how you can use these all up. And testing those, frankly speaking, I was blown away again and again by the sheer quality of the food that was coming out of my wok. And because most of these also keep really quite well, if you love Sichuan food, I do think that it's worth exploring. So in this video, we're going to cover first the basic materials and how to source proper ingredients for this internationally, because I'm going to take a wild stab in the dark that you probably don't live in Chengdu. Then we'll show you the 7 oils, 6 that are kind of a little bit more common in a restaurant context, and 1 little jog to show you how a home cook might make theirs. For each one, we'll teach you the basics of how it's used, and then finally finish it all with showing you how they can be seasoned and combined to form dips and sauces. Now, at the core of any chili oil is going to be chilies and oil. Like, historical recipes for chili oil in Sichuan, a lot of them are basically chili flakes, oil, and that's pretty much it. Nowadays, you see a lot of aromatics in the mix, spices in the mix, but if your chilies aren't delicious, if your oil isn't delicious, it's not going to be a good chili oil. Now, for the peppers, a lot of Sichuan chefs, they'll lean on a blend. Generally speaking, this blend is going to be Zidantou bullet chili for fragrance, Arjingqiao 2-vixen chili for color, and Xiaomila millet chili for heat. These 3 are local cultivars that can be really quite difficult to find outside of China, but that's okay. You don't need this specific chili pepper. You need to understand the logic of why it was selected. So let's start with fragrance. Now, the word fragrant, I think, can be kind of abstract in English, and at least in American English, is often associated with these really subtle flavors, like in wine and fine dining, that kind of thing. So like, okay, pop quiz. Is this chili pepper fragrant? What about this one? If you're not sure, if chili fragrance is something that's a little confusing to you, smell is obviously connected to taste, so think in terms of taste. At the base of your chili oil, you want the best tasting, best quality dried chili that you have available local to you. This is going to be your workhorse chili pepper. Ideally, your dried chili should be fresh enough that it's still somewhat pliable. Also, in an ideal world, it should be something medium spicy if you don't want too many adjustments. For me personally, I really like that aforementioned Arjingqiao 2-vixen chili. Like when we were in Thailand, we'd literally get some shipped down to Bangkok. Obviously, when I'm in the US, though, that's not exactly an option, but that's also not a problem. North America also has access to some fantastic chili peppers in the form of Mexican chilies. You don't need to import chilies from the other side of the world. Guajillo is a fantastic chili pepper, and I think it really works well in Sichuan cuisine. And while I've never been to Europe, I do think that the same logic would apply there. Maybe it's from Hungary or Turkey or Korea or Calabria. Just start with quality. Some of these, they might end up being milder than Sichuan chilies, but that's also completely fine. You can compensate. Because to make a chili oil spicier, it's really not rocket science. You cut your blend with enough of a spicy chili to get the oil up to your personal tolerance level. The oil should be spicy enough to be somewhat uncomfortable if you ate it directly with a spoon. Sichuan chefs, they use Xiaomila millet chili for this function, and that's what we'll also use today as well. In Thailand, I would use dried Thai bird's eye. In the US, I might reach for something like this, but I don't know. Worst comes to worst, they do sell dried Carolina Reapers online. You can make this work. Your quality demands are going to be much, much lower with your spicy chili than with your workhorse chili. Just maybe don't be gross and get something like an extract. And then color, also not rocket science. There are certain cultivars of chilies out there that are extremely, extremely red. Some of them are practically neon. Often, those ones can tend to be pretty mild. Korean gochugaru might be a nice example. In Sichuan, they're spoiled. They actually use arjingtiao for this function. Sometimes they'll say color and fragrance. So for ease of international replication, today what we decided to use was a Kashmiri chili from Xinjiang. In Thailand, what I would use is what they call a big chili. It's the stuff that goes into the Namprek Pao chili jam. And in the US, I like gochugaru. For this function, you might even be able to get away with using a good quality sweet paprika as well. Just don't be weird and use something like food coloring. Which then brings us to oil. Now, in Sichuan, for a good chili oil, there is going to be no choice but caijiao. This is an unprocessed, expeller-pressed rapeseed oil made from a Chinese cultivar called semi-winter rape. The oil, it's got a number of advantages. First, it's not some kind of neutral oil. The stuff actually tastes good. And second, it's liquid at room temperature. And third, importantly, the stuff's actually pretty viscous. The thickness of it is perfect for cold dishes and other applications where you really want the oil to cling to both the ingredient and, when you're eating, the mouth of the eater. Unfortunately, however, caijiao is infamously, brutally difficult to source outside of China, even if you're living in Vancouver. So internationally, I think that the very best substitute is Indian mustard seed oil. If you're buying that, in the US at least, it's often sold with the label for external use only. The FDA slapped it on because of some so-called health concerns from back in the 50s. So don't narc on your Indian grocer. If anybody asks, it's all for your traditional Bengali massage. Besides that, at Chinese grocers in the West, you can often find something like this. This is an unprocessed peanut oil. It smells like peanuts, it tastes great, and the flavor really actually works with spicy food. But unfortunately, it doesn't quite have the same caijiao thickness. So we also tried something a little weird. For this video, something that we also tried testing was the thick, unprocessed oil that's traditional in Western cooking. And that's, of course, olive. My nose and brain, they were really quite confused when I was making this oil, but interestingly, surprisingly, it does actually work in the end. Now, I should emphasize that olive oil is definitely not appropriate for general Sichuan cooking. This only works because we're getting it all up past smoke point, infusing it with these really strong flavors, and importantly, then letting it sit overnight, which we'll get into later. So scout out some international grocers, see what's online, make your selections. So then now, let's whip up some chili oils. So first up, the mainstay, the classic, Hongyou Red Sichuan Chili Oil. Our mix today was 60 grams Arjingtiao chili as our workhorse, 10 grams Xiaomila millet chili for heat, and 30 grams of a Xinjiang Kashmiri chili. Our xinjiang today is in powder form. It's not ideal, but it will be okay, and it does give us a chance to show you how you can handle powders a bit later on. But the Argentao and the spicy chili will first snip into sections, and of course toss the stems. Then, in a wok over a medium-low flame, add in about a tablespoon of oil and then begin to fry your dried chilies. How long this will take will depend on how fresh your dried chilies are. What you're looking for is for the chilies to have deepened in color and feel obviously hard and solid if you poured them against something like a spider. To get to that point, for me today, this was about 4 minutes of frying. Then just jiggle out some of the excess seeds, let the chilies cool down a touch, and then transfer them over to a mortar. We'll then pound this all into a fine flake. You can use a blender or food processor for this if you wanted, but I personally prefer the mortar. Because sometimes with food processors, the rapidity of the movement of the blades can sometimes continue cooking the chili past done. So just be careful not to overdo it if you end up going that route. But either way, once you're looking at a flake that's roughly the same size as a sesame seed, remove it and reserve. Then, aromatics. Now, I should say that not all cooks reach for these, and historically less so. But today, we'll be infusing practically all of our chili oils with a half an onion finely sliced, 2 to 3 inches of ginger good and smashed, and 5 scallions roughly sliced. For the spices then, again, they're also optional. So really any of these that you can't find, just skip them. But ours was 2-star anise, 1 tablespoon Sichuan peppercorn, 3 dried bay leaves, 1 peeled Chinese black cardamom, 3 slices of sand ginger, a third of a cinnamon stick, and a half teaspoon fennel seed. Wet that with a little baijiu liquor or vodka to avoid scorching, and then now we can make our oil. So, to a wok or pot, toss in 2 cups of caijiao or whatever your delicious oil of choice was. Then add in the aromatics and swap your flame to medium-high. Let the aromatics fry and infuse into the oil, and after about 10 minutes of that, add in your spice mix. Once your onion is beginning to get nice and golden brown, about 5 to 8 minutes more, strain that and of course press it all really well to get every last drop. Then add in a tablespoon half of sesame seeds in with your chili flake, and heat your strained flavored oil up until it's just beginning to smoke, or about 190 Celsius. Then just shut off the heat and scoop about a third of a cup of oil from the wok into the flake, and then mix that really well. At this point, we can add our colorful powder in. Reason being that with these very hot oils, fine powders can sometimes like to scorch on you. Then just wait until the oil hits about 150-ish. Add half of that in, stirring well. And then finally, wait until it cools to about 80 C. Mix that in and cover. This 3-stage process is sometimes referred to as 一香二红三辣. And in my personal opinion, the primary benefit of it is that very hot 190 centigrade oil can really bring out the fragrance of the chili. But you do have to be super careful with the quantity and stir it immediately so that things don't scorch on you. As to then why 150 and then 80, honestly, I don't have a really good mental model for you, but this all has been a bit of work already, and the move seems to work. And I'm personally a believer that if the tradition's not broke, there's no need to overthink it. But either way, this oil will then need to sit covered for at least 24 hours before you use it. Because at first, if you taste the thing, it might taste a touch scorched. Don't panic, just check back on it the next day. For whatever reason, time, it really seems to paper over and mellow out any bitter notes that these oils can end up taking on. So then after that time, you can jar it up, and then this jar should be able to last you about 3 months. Just be really careful not to get any drops of water inside, and then also storing it in the fridge can also help. Now, as to how to use the stuff, I think maybe the question might be a little bit more how you can't use the stuff. I mean, you see it in liangban cold salads, noodle dishes, wontons, soaked dishes like boboji, again, even as a finishing oil for a stir fry. So I think this one, it's pretty self-explanatory. Just find some Sichuan recipes online that you want to make and then use the thing. If you do happen to be stuck though, we will also have a little Sichuan cold dish formula for you down in the link Substack post. But when you're using it, you are going to have two options: just chili oil or chili oil with sediment. Now, the way I learned this was that if you were using just the oil, it was called hongyou or red oil, and that if you were including the sediment, it was called youladzi or cooked chili oil. I've since learned that I was totally wrong. Linguistically, in Sichuan dialect, it's not that clear. People use both words to describe both. The word youladzi might just be a little bit more colloquial. But I think that the framework can still be helpful. I personally associate with the sediment with a lot of things like street food, home cooking, some restaurant cooking. And if you use just the oil, it's going to be a little bit more smooth, a little bit more spicy, a little bit more elegant. Now, if you'll notice, in our previous chili oil, we didn't really include Sichuan peppercorn. We did a little in the spice mix, but that was mostly just to get a little floralness. It definitely would not be enough to constitute one of the most famous flavors around the world for Sichuan cuisine, and that's mala, numbing spicy. So to incorporate Sichuan pepper into a chili oil, you have a couple options. One route would just be to deep fry a whole bunch of peppercorns in the oil and then keep them in the chili oil to continue to infuse over time. And that might actually be what I personally prefer, but the downside of that approach is that if you're using the sediment, the oil is just going to have also a bunch of Sichuan peppercorns in it. And given that surprise Sichuan peppercorn is probably one of the most common food-related complaints among expats and travelers that are new to China, today we decided to use a powder. And so to make some, we'll first toast a mix of red and green Sichuan peppercorn, 12 grams red for flavor, 8 grams green for numbing, and just use all red if you can't find green. Then just toast those in a dry wok over a medium-low flame for about 3 minutes, or until the peppercorns can leave these little oil splotches on the side of the wok. Then we'll just pound those in our mortar. Again, you can totally use a spice grinder for this. I just personally like to keep mine a little on the coarser side. Then for the chilies, we'll also be adjusting our mix. We'll cut out the Xinjiang chili and instead use 70 grams of our workhorse Argenteuil and 30 grams of our spicy Xiaomi. Fry them up just like before, pound or grind them just like before, and then infuse 2 cups of oil with aromatics and spices just like before. But then, after you strain, add in about a half shot of baijiu liquor or vodka in with the Sichuan peppercorn powder and wet it well. This will help prevent the powder from scorching. Then just do the same move, 1/3 cup of smoking hot oil, mixed very well, and then after that you can transfer the Sichuan pepper. Then again, do half the oil at 150, the remaining at 80, and then cover and wait at least 24 hours. The end result after that time should be an oil that's very spicy and very numbing. Now, for me personally, I usually wouldn't make something like this for myself at home because I personally prefer controlling the chili oil and the numbingness separately. For me, I would much rather have a big batch of red oil that I can use among a number of different flavors, and then just toast and grind Sichuan peppercorn when I want to make it a little more numbing. But this oil, it can undeniably be useful and extremely useful in a restaurant context, as if you have a lot of mala dishes, it's obviously a lot easier to just reach for mala chili oil. Now, one of the most obvious examples, I think, might be something like malatang, which is a restaurant concept that you see across China these days. What you do when you go to malatang is that you grab whatever ingredients that you want, and then they'll cook it down into a thin soup. They'll season it, and then they'll top with this kind of mala chili oil. In Sichuan proper, at the liangbang cold dish stands, they'll often have 2 different oils that they'll reach for, and they'll blend a mala oil with a red chili oil to arrive at the spicy, numbing level that the customer wants. Which then brings us to what actually would be different if you were looking at a Sichuan family cook this instead of a Sichuan restaurant. Now, first, a family probably isn't going to be grinding and frying their own chilies. Instead, they're going to be getting flakes from the market. But before you throw the previous recipes out the window, you do need to understand that chili flakes at a Sichuan market are going to be much fresher, much higher quality than that random bag that's been sitting on the supermarket shelf for months. At some markets in southwest China, they even have these really cool steampunk looking contraptions, and the chilies are literally pounded right there in front of you. And further, most shops also have different kinds of chili flakes with different profiles from different cultivars, and then people can also mix and match to their own tastes. So I don't know what they have in Mexico. If you have something similar where you live, starting with flakes would be a no-brainer. But in my personal experience, and this isn't to shade on Western food, there's some great ingredients there too, but supermarket available chili flakes, for me at least, they just don't get me where I want to go. So I would personally still recommend frying and grinding your workhorse pepper at the very least. Then second, while different families are obviously different, usually you would see a much more restrained selection of aromatics and spices than you would in professional kitchens. Reason being that home kitchens are usually affording better caijiao than you find outside. Restaurant oil in China tends to be a lower grade than what's at the supermarket, and some restaurants also cut their oil with cheap neutral oils, or sometimes even just use a cheap neutral straight up. And the less flavorful your oil is, the heavier with spices and aromatics you'll want to go. So especially if you can source caijiao or Indian mustard seed oil, I do think that you can feel totally free to cut back. In this batch, my infusion was just 1 datong, English name Welsh onion, and 3 inches of ginger together with 1 tablespoon of Sichuan pepper. But if you were working off of a peanut oil or an olive oil or a neutral oil, I would personally still recommend the full spate to help compensate. But either way, sizzle over a bit at 190, half at 150, and the remainder at a cool 80, cover, and then jar it up. So then, now we've got 4 oils that are really more of a restaurant thing, but the most common among them is probably Laoyo, or old oil. The name is probably derived from Laoyo Hoguo, that is, old Chongqing hot pot, and they definitely do share a number of similarities. Laoyo, it's a little bit simpler than hot pot base. The primary difference is that this is unseasoned and it uses caijiao instead of beef tallow. This stuff is sometimes called hot dish chili oil, reason being that it can be used as an instant base to start off various stir fries. And like hot pot base, instead of chili powder, it does start with a product called ciba, or pounded chili. This stuff is made by soaking 80 grams of your workhorse chili in with hot boiled water for 45 minutes. And you can also cut that with a spicy chili if you wanted something a bit spicier. Then, after that time, you'll strain well, add it to a mortar, and I personally like to unconventionally also add in a 1/4 teaspoon of salt and a clove of garlic to help the chilies break down and emulsify. It's not standard practice, full disclosure, and you can also use a food processor here too. But either way, you're looking for something pasty in the end. Then, in addition to using a pounded chili paste, the other big similarity is that this is also using 2 tablespoons of doucher, Chinese fermented black soybeans, minced and soaked with a little liquor, together with a 1/4 cup of Pixian doubanjiang, Sichuan chili bean paste, also minced. Then the aromatics, we did opt for a bit of a fuller mix for this one, including a large stalk of Chinese celery and 2 cilantros as well. We just kind of enjoy those with this specific flavor, but they're both optional, and they can also be added to the other oils too if you wanted. Then spices in, same as before, another 10 minutes, and because those leafy herbs do like to drink a little oil, I'll then supplement this with 2 tablespoons of extra caijiao. Then add in the ciba chili paste into the oil, and begin to slowly fry that over a medium-low flame. We're looking for the chili to expel its moisture, stain the oil, and morph into a lighter, almost orangish hue. This will take a bit, about 15 minutes, but then once it's at that point, strain it and reserve. Then add in the minced Pixian doubanjiang, and over a low flame, begin to fry that until it's dry. After 3 minutes or so, go in with the minced doucher, and once the liquor there is evaporated off, roughly 2 minutes more, shut off the heat. Return the fried chili back to the wok, mix that well, and then let that all come back down to room temperature. Then transfer, and then let it sit. Now, because this stuff already has a level of salinity to it, in a restaurant context, again, it can function as a sort of instant stir fry or soup base. For the size of a normal dish, you could start the thing off with about a tablespoon, tablespoon and a half, together with all the chunky bits. And then optionally, you could finish it off with a touch of the oil, san sediment in the end. Dishes that might be appropriate for this kind of treatment might be things like twice cooked pork, jachang tofu, or maybe even some varieties of mapo tofu. Then the last three are also the same category, that is, tasty ways that you can streamline stuff in a commercial setting. These three are a little less common than lao yo, but they can be useful and they are unquestionably also quite tasty. So this one, hula jiao yo, it can be a chili oil, but just as common, it can also be just chili sans oil, in which case they're called hulaka. The name literally means burnt chili, and what they are chilies that are deep fried to a very deep borderline scorched state. You might not guess it, but these are actually quite aromatic, and they can be sprinkled into dishes like kung pao chicken, which is probably its most famous application. You can also, however, see it in an oil form. To make it, we'll first infuse things with aromatics and spices, like always, though with this one it's especially optional. And then after straining, get the oil up to about 130 C. Then add in 60 grams of your workhorse chili cut into half-inch sections, and then deep fry that for about 7 minutes or until the chili gets to be a deep chestnut color like so. Then strain, set it aside, and add in 10 grams of red Sichuan peppercorn soaked in a bit of liquor. Once all the moisture is expelled, about 2 minutes, ladle those back over the chilies and then let that all soak. This will then be used in the hula flavor profile in Sichuan cooking. Kung Pao, to reiterate, is the most famous, but you can also see it in things like huajiao pork and various Chiang dishes. To execute this flavor, at home, we should be clear that most home cooks, they would just start by shallow frying some cut chilies in a bit of oil, taking them out, and then you can add them in later on, frying in that oil. In restaurants, the pre-prepared hulaka would probably be the most common move, but I think using some of this oil can actually help add back a bit of the missing flavor. So if you've got this stuff, you can start your kung pao with aromatics and a little less oil than you usually would, and then add in your scorched chilies together with a couple Sichuan peppers and about a tablespoon of that oil. And optionally use a little more of said oil to finish the thing. Next, pickled chili oil. Now, we do have to be upfront here that for this recipe, straight out of the tin, sourcing it might be borderline impossible. Because this will rely on Chinese fermented chilies, but not a can like this one. You can get this one. These are both fermented, but these kinds of Sichuan sort are very, very sour. We'll be using two types, one a not spicy large sort, and one a very spicy small pickled heaven facing. You might be able to find the latter at a Chinese supermarket, but the former, I just don't think it's available internationally. You might be able to play around with vinegar pickled chilies or maybe Korean ones. It's a tough source. But we'll be taking 280 grams of a large pickled chili, slice them open. They are going to have a lot of moisture inside, so we'll quickly give them a strain. We'll be looking for about 140 grams after straining. Then slice off the stem of the spicy pickled chili, 80 grams worth, and then also chop up 60 grams of pickled ginger. At this point, we'll finely mince this all together until it's super pasty, which will take a hot second, so do be patient. And again, food processor's totally fine if you've got one. But either way, once you're looking at something a bit like this, set it aside. We'll then infuse our oil with onion, scallion, and ginger, same as before. But with this oil, we'll lower the quantity to 1.5 cups. And then for the spices, we also wanted to keep things a little on the light and fresh side, so we simplified to this mix. Then strain that all, and then add in the pickled chili paste. Swap the flame to medium-high and slowly fry until the pickled chili turns an orangish hue, and it looks closer to a cooked chili than a fresh chili, or about 8 to 10 minutes. Then just shut off the heat and reserve. Now, in a restaurant context, you could almost think of this as kind of like a style of laoyo. Some recipes will even include a little Sichuan chili bean paste, which is also a route that you could go. This will be an instant start to dishes that make heavy use of pickled chilies, like pao jiao kidney or various fish fragrant dishes. You start off with the oil, aromatics, maybe a little extra pickled chili to hit a couple different notes. The oil is excellent with tomato, and you can also use it in noodles, and pickled chili rice noodles are also a thing. In that dish, the usefulness is pretty obvious. This oil takes what would take about 5 minutes or so of frying patiently in the beginning into something a little bit more instant. And again, full recipe for that will also be down in the Substack. Now, all the previous chili oils, they all use dried chilies, or I guess otherwise preserved chilies, which is the most common way that you see the chili pepper employed in Sichuan cuisine. This chili oil uses fresh chili. It's a comparative rarity and specific to the salt gang cuisine around Zigong and its environs. Most famously, their Xinjiao rabbit or beef, and to a lesser extent, beef noodles. No, this will be based off of 140 grams of a fresh, spicy chili. This was Chinese heaven-facing chili. You could also use Thai bird's eye, minced together with 60 grams worth of ginger. You don't need to get this as fine as the pickled chili. Something like this is perfect. Then we'll separately mince 80 grams of young ginger, which I do know is kind of hard to find abroad. 2 possible alternatives down below, and then set both of those aside. Then we'll infuse the oil just like the pickled chili oil, also the same spice mix too as said oil. Then strain and add in the young ginger and swap the flame to medium-high. Once that young ginger's released the bulk of its aggressive sounding moisture, about 90 seconds, add in the chili ginger mixture. You'll be looking again for the chili to have released a good bit of its moisture, but not all, and turn into a light red cooked chili hue, which will likely take about 8 to 10 minutes. Then set that aside and jar it up. That said, one very important bit is that unlike our previous chili oils, this one cannot keep. It has fresh ingredients inside, and even though we fried it all up, fresh aromatics in an anaerobic environment is still beginning to play a little bit with fire. So keep this one in the fridge next to the pickled chili, but I personally wouldn't go past about 2 weeks with it. We'll link a recipe to the super famous Xianjiao rabbit, but if you're looking for a quick way to use this one up, we personally have enjoyed it as a topping for rice noodles. To whip something like that up, grab about 1.5 tablespoons of the fresh chili oil, mix it with about 1/2 tablespoon soy sauce, 1/4 teaspoon salt, 1/4 teaspoon sugar, 1/8 teaspoon MSG, and 1 teaspoon oyster sauce. Then just chop up some herbs, some scallions, some cilantro, and mix it all with cooked rice noodles or even noodles. So then that's it. 7 chili oils. Now, we did promise you all the Sichuan chili oils, so I think it would also be natural to ask us about products like this. This is a seasoned chili oil. You can find this specific brand almost everywhere in China, I think internationally too. The stuff is made in Sichuan, and there's even similar international products like Fly By Jing. Now, while we don't have a time machine, we would hazard that these sorts of bottles are newer entrances to the market. I would guess that they might have been inspired by the breakout popularity of Laogamma from neighboring Guizhou. And because they're seasoned, you can just dump it on stuff, which is, of course, very convenient for modern, busy home cooks. So we consider something like that to be a derivative product of the base chili oils, because to make something like that, using a hongyou really isn't very difficult. You take your chili oil, you add some salt, MSG, a little bit of sugar, and then that is more than good enough to top over your fried egg. If you wanted a little bit of that food industry flavor, you can also add a little garlic powder and maybe a little chicken powder to get use of the I+G. Now, this specific product, it also has some crunchy fried peanuts and soybeans in it. Crunchy stuff seems to be a common move in these kinds of things. So feel free to add anything crunchy in that you like. Get weird, get local, like add some corn nuts and chicharron, Maybe some of the previously fried onion? Why not? Or alternatively, you might also find some products that are like this, the lineage of which is a little bit clearer. This stuff seems obviously derived from Sichuan's famed douhua dipping sauces, many of which, in turn, are also derived from these base chili oils. Now, I am starting to run a little bit out of breath today, so if you're interested in learning how to make a dip like that, do check out our chili tofu rice lunchtime integration initiative video for 3 dips that can also make use of these chili oils. So again, even more recipes are down in the Substack for how to use these. They're free as always, so definitely check them out. And a huge, huge thank you to everybody that's supporting us on Patreon. And of course, subscribe for more Chinese cooking videos.